Okay, so we're back on 69. I got to get this car finished up with a line in the front end, but first I'm going to test fit this 5-liter in here. So I got it all strapped up, got the motor mounts on, about to lift it up and put it in place just to make sure that we have no clearance issues before I do any of the shock tower plates. Mock up the transmission, which I have here, and make sure everything's good to go. So let's drop this engine in place. So I just pulled the motor back out. You saw I just stuck it in there, and it was being held up from fully seating on the motor mount locations because it was hitting that crossmember where I sharpied it with the oil pan. So a little bit of an issue with that. It was about 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch. I could get the bolt in on one side, that side, because the oil pan is tapered a little bit, favoring that side. But from that whole center location, it was about 1/4 to a 1/2 inch. It needed to go lower, but it was being held up by that cross member. And I think once I dropped that down a little bit, the bell housing would clear the firewall a little bit better, because I held the bell housing up just to see how close it was, and it was hitting the firewall before it seated onto the back of that block. So gotta correct some of that before I can set it back in and fit everything else. But that did let me know that it has plenty of clearance around it. So I'm going to put in the shock tower plates a while and fix where the oil pan needs clearance there, and then bring it back over here after I put the fenders and everything else back on. Got the car back on the platform over here to start welding everything up, and I went ahead and trimmed out these panels and got them tacked into place on both sides. Now, I did it this way just because the other way, it just didn't make any sense to me. They originally had you just overlap this panel onto this panel, so there'd be a ledge there. So you'd end up filling that, and it'd be just a buildup onto top of that. So usually how I always do it is I butt it up against that, so then it's already smooth across, so it's the least amount of body filler that you'll need in the end. So it's a little bit less work, and I think it'll look better in the end. So I got them all tacked in place, so I'm just going to finish welding them, and then I got to grind down the welds. And after that, just a couple other things. These rear aprons, you can see how they have the holes for the fender clips. These rear ones don't have them, so I got to cut them in on both sides. And then after that, I'll be able to start hanging the front end. Alright, so now what I'm going to do next is cut out these holes that they didn't have in the replacement panels for the fender bolt clips. You can see how they should be. So I just have an original one that I cut out that's supposed to go in that spot because it needs this big hole for that fender bumper, which is similar to up front. So all I did was I mocked up the fender, made a spot where the fender hole should be, and then I put this up there, centered it with that hole, and aligned it, and then I traced them. Next thing I'll do, take the plasma cutter, and I'll cut that out as close as I can, and then I'll go back with it, the Dremel tool, ream them holes out until they look like they should. So that's what I'm going to do right now. And that's what I'm left with. Just cutting them out freehand with the plasma cutter. And now I'll go back with the Dremel tool and clean up the edges so it looks similar to that. So that's what I'm going to do now. I have the apron plates all welded in, ground down. So those are good to go. And I also, when I mocked up the fenders, I put in these fender brackets. Similar to how I did on the last 65 build. I bolted them to the fender, stuck the fender on, see where they needed to go, and then I tacked them in place and pulled the fender off, and then finished welding them. So I'm going to finish up these holes, and we'll be back. And that's what I'm going for in the end result after that Dremel tool. Go in there and clean that up, and it just makes it look like it should from the factory. So now I have all my holes here. I'm going to set the rest of the fender clips in like that one. Put them in place. I have my rocker nuts in. Fender brackets are welded in. So I'm going to start mocking up these front fenders. I had to cut this one out too. So we're good to go. Sorry if this video was a little bit scattered. It's a lot of work moving car from one garage to the other. There's no front wheels. So it's setting up the camera back and forth. But we'll be back on it tomorrow on the rest of this front end. I did get the fender somewhat lined up on both sides. And got the hood hinges just sitting in place. So tomorrow I'll be doing fender extensions, stone guard, valence, and getting the hood on and lined up to line up the rest of that front end. And then just like the 65, I'll go back and do all the gaps last. So that'll be for tomorrow's video. Thanks for watching this one, and we'll see you in the next one.